I think this is it. I heard from Katie and Rachel that they cannot make it. Rachel's at Cedar Campus.
Right.
Katie has a event on campus. I haven't heard from Nate, but I feel like maybe he mentioned longer ago that he wasn't going to be here tonight. So anyway, let's dive in. I think we'll enjoy our discussion tonight because I've made it interactive and we get to do a little bit of role playing. So hopefully you guys enjoy that kind of thing. If not, just know that this is only an hour and a half of your life. So, and with a few of us, maybe we'll get out early too. Who knows? So we'll see. I wanted to start off with another like icebreaker question, even though we're starting to get to know each other. We don't really need to break the ice, so to speak, anymore. But I'd like to hear a high and a low so far in your MPD journey here. I know you haven't really started diving in yet to appointments and that kind of thing, but let's say one or the other, or if you can think of both, then great. This could be related to rounding up contact information. It could be something related to one of these calls. It could be, a conversation you've had about what you're going to be doing with a friend or family member that went awry or was really amazing and awesome and surpassed your expectations. But I'll give you a second to think. A high and or a low in your MPD journey so far. Whenever someone's ready, feel free to speak right up.
I'm ready. I would say a low has been I haven't had much time to like do like all the work that's in base camp, like just kind of like catching up because like even though it's the end of the semester for me, but also like I know like I've said previously, like I love my city, so I'm very like interactive, and so I feel like every time like I think I have time to do stuff, I was just like, oh yeah, I did commit to that in March because I commit to stuff earlier on, and so I forget that I have all this stuff to do. I think that's been like a low, and so like trying to catch up has been hard. And then my group project, this is like a sidebar, my group project, I got an A on my part in the paper, but the rest of my group got an F. So I have an F because they didn't do right. They didn't do their portion of the paper right. So that was annoying. So that set me back even more because now like I have an alternative assignment. So now I have to write like 4 essays to like make up for that F, even though my portion of the paper got an A. So I'm just like, dang, there's always something. But I'm like, it's a blessing in that because she didn't have to give us an alternative assignment. We could have just, taken an F, but I am grateful for that. But at high, I think like there's been so much encouragement because I've just been sharing with people about like going on staff and stuff like that. And so a lot of people are asking questions like, Serena, like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Because you're so gifted. I'm just like, yeah, because God called me to do it, So it's been cool to share that with people because I think I don't know, like they're more concerned with the money rather than God calling me to this place. So, but it's been cool to share God's, something's wrong with my Zoom. It keeps asking me to leave the meeting. Anyway, but yeah, so that's been a blessing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're probably finding yourself having to educate a lot of the people that you talk to about what it is you're doing. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Reality for a lot of us. Yep. Okay, well, thanks for sharing. Thanks for starting us off, Serena. Kristen or Savannah?
I can share. So I actually like literally wrote down the same low, and as you were saying it, like I was writing down that same thing. Like I just feel like I haven't had a lot of time to work on things because of like school and everything. But thankfully, I'm all finished with schoolwork, so I've had time over the weekend and today to kind of play catch up a little bit and feel like I have a better handle on it. I'm like getting ready with the case stuff and the MPD letters and announcements and stuff. So I'm excited about that. I think a high has been talking to some of my like extended family members. I wasn't expecting a super great reaction from them, because a lot of them like aren't Christians, and I kind of assumed that they just wouldn't understand what I was doing and would rather me do something that was going to make some more money. But they just have been really, really supportive of it, and I've been like, I think that this is a great fit for you and your personality, and have even like been trying to help me like prepare for like moving to Buchanan and like making sure I have what I need to do that. So it's been a surprising response from them in a good way.
Okay, so for me, first of all, I'm so sorry, Serena, for the group project going awry. I absolutely hate group projects for exactly that reason. What the heck? But at least you're getting to like make it up. That's good. So I am going to, in a stunning turn of events, tell you that my low is that I haven't had enough time. Right? And it was rough because like even just this morning I was like, la-di-da, I got all these finals to get to, and I was like, oh, I have MPD tonight. And then I like kind of crammed some of the homework. And I'm also realizing I think the thing's gonna be a little bit rough, but still manageable, but just honestly, it's kind of rough, is by the time I get, like the time I'm going to get to catch up is also gonna be an emotionally and like just generally hard time, because it's gonna be once college is over and, you know, my friends are going back home and kind of processing that college is over and that those relationships are changing. At the same time, it's like, oh, but life goes on, so you're going to start like fundraising. And I'm like, but honestly, it's I think a little rough, but I'm not overwhelmed. I think, you know, obviously God's working, is going to lead me through this. I'm going to have the support of friends here, so it's not the worst thing ever. But a high point is I think I'm just feeling really excited about what's going to be going down. Excited about going forward in the future. So there's good stuff. I think I've gotten to have some like fun conversations with faculty and stuff. Like I actually just had this faculty from our school. I don't know if he's going to end up be able to help me, or if I should even just say if he wants to stay with WVU. But he just asked what I was doing after college, and I forgot to do the actual MPD type, you know, ask. But I just said, oh, I'm doing this. He's like, oh, I'm so excited. That's awesome, because he's a Christian too. And I was just passing by him in the hallway, and randomly I was just like, hey, I like your vest. He's like, yeah, hey, keep in touch when you leave school, even though I didn't know him that well. And I was like, okay, so I'm excited. I think there might be like possibilities even that I wasn't expecting.
Add him to your prospects list for sure. Yeah, those are kind of cues people give us that let us know that they might be good people to pursue as partners down the road. Well, thanks for sharing, all three of you. I think you're gonna, Savannah mentioned something about like having high hopes for the future, and you have some fun things to look forward to. I really think Chicago is going to be fun, even though we'll probably be cooped up on a campus and not have, and it's way out in the suburbs, so we're not going to be like doing Michigan Avenue at 10 o'clock at night, probably. I don't think it's worked into the schedule, but just being together and being able to get to know everyone on this team better, and get to know a number of other brand new hires from the New England region and Great Lakes West, and a bunch of staff that will be your future colleagues that you cross paths with at different events like Urbana or different trainings. It's just very exciting, and it's going to be a lot of fun too. It will be intense, and then your summer is going to be also very intense. It'll, you know, if you put your heart and soul into it, it's going to feel like one of those. It's going to be a little bit like hiking the Appalachian Trail. Like it feels very daunting, takes a ton of planning and lots of hard work, lots of perseverance, but you're going to remember the summer for the rest of your life. And if you work really hard, the payoff will be incredible. it'll set you up well as you launch into staff. So yeah, let's get down to business. I wanted, first of all, just wanted to debrief the videos that we watched for the direct and indirect asks. Did you all have a chance to watch those? Give me a thumbs up if you did. Okay, not everybody. That's fine. I think we can proceed with the conversation, and we'll just explain a few things as we go if needed, because our exercise later kind of involves some of these things. But for those of you who did watch the videos, I wanted to, I don't know, just ask a few observations that you had about each one, about the direct ask and about the indirect ask. So could you guys in the chat just write down a few things that you remember from those videos? I'll do the same. How you guys doing? Still working? Kristen's good. Still okay. So I'll just read through the ones that we came up with. I put down that if a prospective white partner is from a rural background, it might be appropriate to be indirect. That was a new piece of information for me, but I was thinking about how in some conservative churches, especially white rural churches, sometimes they can be kind of patriarchal, where the women aren't really encouraged to lead or make decisions or speak on behalf of her husband or something. So that was just an example I thought of maybe someone from a rural setting. They might perceive a college-educated person as being a city slicker, sophisticate, and be a little taken aback by someone coming into their space and making an ask like this. So Savannah wrote, in relation to direct asks, feels more straightforward and certain, like you'll have a good idea of the answer immediately. This is also my least favorite way to ask someone for something personally, so it will be a challenge. Yep, I hear you. Kristen wrote, there are different types of direct and indirect asks, like soft, direct, hard, and indirect. And I wrote something similar. There's a whole spectrum of indirect asks, from hard direct on the one side all the way to having somebody ask on your behalf. Savannah wrote, in regarding indirect asks. Joy Pettigrew got name dropped, so that was an exciting IVLI throwback. Seems easier and more comfortable to ask, but also seems to require much more follow-up work. I don't get the reference. Can you tell us what that's about?
There was just a moment in it where I don't remember the speaker's name, but she's talking, and then she said, "So my friend Joy, who's on staff, is from Hong Kong," and I was like, "That has to be Joy Pettigrew," and I got really excited.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's right. Yep. And then I wrote, staff may communicate indirectly without realizing it when they, for example, send out a bunch of letters and mention the need, but then never follow up. So, all right. So hopefully you kind of starting to wrap your mind around the difference between direct and indirect, and thinking through situations within your networks that indirect would be appropriate. Do you guys have any questions at this point about anything that you encountered in those videos? Something that wasn't clear?
I think it's maybe not as much not being clear, but I think one thing I'm wondering is how to maneuver, maybe not exactly, I don't know if it's exactly indirect, but in places like, I know in my family's culture, you just don't ask for money ever.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's necessarily about being direct or indirect, or like if there's a certain way, because that's the thing is they say usually Italians are direct communicators, but in that same token, you don't ask for money. So I'm wondering how to like maneuver that in like family and family friends, because a lot of people I think will be potential donors for like bigger support are going to be Italian American and like recent immigrants.
Yeah. Well, do you think approaching your family in a more indirect fashion, similar to how you would if they were, say, Asian, for example, do you think that would produce the desired results?
I think that's going to be worth a try, because it's hard with a lot of like family, because they live further away. It's like I don't have super duper close relationships where I can just like go up and ask like really casually. But I think that was what I was thinking, was a little bit of what she said with the example with like her auntie, and there was a little bit of the like direct indirect. I think that's going to be something worth trying, and then just trial and error, seeing what happens, and praying for minimal drama if I make a mistake.
Yeah. Another tactic you may consider is finding a bridge builder, like somebody who is able to navigate their subculture, their norms, and speak the language, so to speak. But then it can also, be comfortable relating to you and how it would be most naturally for you to talk about money or whatever. If there's a family member who kind of fits that role, you could think about, you could like maybe explain the dilemma you have to that person and see if they're willing to kind of speak on your behalf in some way, kind of like the far right end of the spectrum on that indirect asks graphic. Just something to consider. Yeah. Okay. Just a few points of emphasis here before we kind of transition to our interactive activity. So it's important for all of us, no matter what our ethnic background is, to be well-versed in both direct and indirect asks, because just like we contextualize student ministry to students, we contextualize MPD for ministry partners. We always want to be donor-centric. So we always want to modify our message to be as readily received and digested by our donors, rather than forcing them to modify and adapt to us and in our message and our ways. Our goal with an ask is to make sure it is clear enough without shaming the potential ministry partner. So we think of the the shame and honor as being more prevalent, say, in Eastern cultures, like Asian cultures. I think there's elements of it in other cultures as well, just maybe not as prominently. But do you all kind of understand? Serena, you've been to China, and Kristen too. So you guys probably have some firsthand understanding of the honor and shame, what that's getting at. Yeah. So in cultures like East Asian cultures, they're so hospitable, so accommodating. About the worst thing they can do is to appear like they're withholding any kind of resource from you to be a good friend or a good host. And so it's almost a unspoken rule that they will, you ask for something and sure, I will give it to you. And so sometimes we can put people coming from that background into a real bind if they don't have the means to say yes to what we're asking of them. But yet there is this like indebtedness, there's this loyalty, and so that's where the shaming comes in, is where they may find themselves just dumbstruck, like I can't say yes. I have to say yes, but I can't, and then layers of shame there. And so we just need to be sensitive to that. And that's where the whole indirect ask thing comes in. I think you all are understanding that. For most white and black people, most of your peers of any ethnicity, so people that you attended college with, and some people in any ethnic group, if they are very assimilated, you can do a fairly direct ask where you do ask for a specific amount. But for first generation immigrants, who are your parents' generation, or sometimes Latino or Latina immigrants, depending on where they're from, and Native Americans, you'll want to do a more indirect ask. And I don't know if on your lists that you're compiling right now, since none of you are Asian, Latinx, or Native, if you have partners that are from those ethnic backgrounds, but chances are at some point in your career with InterVarsity, you will do some kind of appointment with someone who is from one of those backgrounds. And so it's always important to know, to have these tools to rely on and these skills. Let's see. It might be appealing to all of us to do MPD more indirectly, like I was using with my example of sending out the letters and just kind of waiting for a response. But not only is that very ineffective, like very, very few people will respond to just a letter alone. And if they do, it's going to be, pretty low monthly amount, or, a one-time gift. There's exceptions, but generally speaking, there's a reason why we ask you guys to strive for face-to-face appointments. A lot of times we also would not be honoring the prospective donor's culture if we just send them a letter and that's it. Remember, most cultures in the world are more relational than we are as Westernized Americans. We tend to communicate with a goal in mind, and much of the rest of the world doesn't do that. They'd much rather sit down and share some stories. And so that's kind of how the new 2030 case is structured, is to allow and invite storytelling, not only from us, but also to hear ways that God has worked in the lives of our partners. So in a nutshell, God is inviting us to take risks, to be bold, and to ask in culturally appropriate ways. If you don't know how, if you feel stuck, ask your coach, ask your supervisor, or ask somebody close to you in the culture who will be excited to help you navigate these dynamics. I will caveat that last line with just a word of caution to not repeatedly badger a friend of color that you have. Like, let's say you have an Asian friend, or if you're a white staff and you have a black friend, and you feel like you need to to go to them to be your cultural navigator. That can make people feel used. So you want to make sure that the person you're asking advice from is game, and that you don't exasperate them by doing it too often or whatever. So we're going to take a moment here just real quick to talk through the ethnic backgrounds of some potential ministry partners before we dive into our activity. Asian American, again, indirect communicators, especially those who are first generation in this country, those who are elders, like, a decade older than you or more. Remember how Rachel in the video, even without directly asking, presented her need to Auntie Anita. Not only the amount she was trying to raise, but also the number of ministry partners she was hoping to bring onto her team. She just kind of presented that. She pointed out also how supportive of missions the Chinese church that they were both part of had been, kind of as a way of contextualizing what it was she was after. Like, if the church supports missions, maybe we could go for something similar here. Again, indirect. Consider the relational distance and hierarchy. Auntie Anita is older than Rachel. She's a pastor's wife, which is a position of honor in that culture. In amongst our Black partners, they tend to be more direct, but they may be less familiar with giving to parachurch ministries and more familiar with giving to their church, supporting things locally. Do you all know what the word parachurch means? You're all familiar with that? Okay, great. Some of the Black staff that I coach find themselves having to do sort of a parachurch ministry 101 talk with their friends and family members and their church people. And sometimes they have to draw upon some of the passages that we looked at back in session 1 when talking about the biblical basis for fundraising for ministry, because they run into people all the time who are just completely surprised that InterVarsity would require staff to raise their own support, that kind of thing. So with Latino partners, they can be more or less direct depending on the community, but they also may be less familiar with parachurch and local giving. Relational distance and hierarchy and gender may also be factors there. And then in white contexts, communication can be more direct, again, except in more rural communities. You may want to be a little bit more indirect. They may be more or less conservative theologically regarding women in ministry, and they may be more or less familiar with parachurch giving. I'm just curious, for the two of you who are from West Virginia, do you think right now that you would need to approach some of your partners, some of your white partners who come from more rural backgrounds in a more indirect way? I know, Savannah, you talked about your Italian family members, but how about like people that you cross paths with day to day in West Virginia?
Some of the people on my list are like people that are mostly connected with my parents. And those are probably the only ones, the ones that I really don't feel like I have a relationship with. They really kind of just know my family or my parents. And I think just because I don't know, I think those are really the only ones where I was leaning more towards an indirect ask. But most of the people in my context, I feel like I could do a direct ask with.
Okay. Yeah.
I think most of the churches I've grown up with, people come from more direct backgrounds, so I feel like I could ask more directly. I feel like the places where it'll be more indirect, I feel like that part of West Virginia culture is going to be more south in the panhandles, whereas like, the area we are is a little bit more like kind of business-minded. A lot of people came from somewhere else, so
right.
It's not so much of like they're more direct communicators. I do think there's going to be a lot of, talking about women in ministry because, Different views. I mean, I know my home church, it's mixed views because on one hand, they like we have all male pastors because that's their reading of so the Paul's passages is that the men should serve those specific roles as pastors. But I'm also I've seen them be very supportive of women in ministry in other realms. So I don't think that's going to be a thing stopping me from getting funding. So I'm thinking about that because I think that's something to be aware of when I do ask people that I'm not as familiar with or West Virginian to keep that in mind, because I definitely see where indirect will come into play, and also getting other people kind of on your side and building that trust before. But I think another thing I'm looking forward to is my home church. My head pastor is university alumni from Michigan. So
Oh, I think I've met him. Blonde hair, forget his name, but
what? Long hair, you said?
Does he have blonde hair?
Blonde, kind of. Steve Felder?
Maybe. Somebody came to a regional staff conference last year when I was at Canaan Valley.
I think that was my pastor,
Oh.
Sean Whiteman.
Okay, yeah, but you both have pastors from Michigan, huh? Weird. That's coincidence.
Well, Sean isn't. I don't think Sean's from Michigan, but
one of them was from
oh.
maybe not. I don't know.
There's a lot of West Virginians from Michigan and vice versa.
Okay.
I found when I was growing up, I remember I knew a lot of neighbors and people who came from Michigan, and I was like, why? That's just such a random place to come here from.
They want mountains, and it's the closest place. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. I was just curious. Two more groups to talk about real quick. Native people. Most of those, the larger concentrations of Native Americans tend to live out west. They are more communal, more indirect, high context communicators. They also may be less familiar with parachurch giving. And then I wanted to talk about non-evangelical partners. So those could be Christians, but they're attending perhaps a mainline church, or it could be a person who's nominally Christian. It's perfectly fine to go after those folks as partners. God can use the work that we're doing to speak to them and reveal to them who He is. But you want to approach your message. You want to craft your talk a little bit differently with them. They may be less familiar with parachurch giving, less comfortable with evangelical language, like being saved, conversions. A lot of biblical language around the Trinity or God's glory. Those kind of things just might kind of fly up over their heads. They might not know what you're talking about all the time. But you might want to emphasize some of the ways InterVarsity interacts with matters of social justice. You could emphasize our commitments to multi-ethnicity, emphasize how female students and staff are encouraged to use their gifts, even those that involve preaching and teaching. Mention things like the abolitionist plunge that's focused on fighting human trafficking. Whatever you think your non-evangelical partner would resonate with. You can emphasize the leadership development that happens in InterVarsity. Certainly don't lie about the fact that we're an evangelical organization, but you can choose to emphasize certain things over others. Yep. So a few takeaways: be donor-centric, be as personalized as possible. Remember to adapt your message to your donor rather than making them adapt themselves to you. You want to be as clear as you can about what you're after without shaming someone. It's always good to include prayer, and to ask them to pray for you. So you can pray with them during the appointment, but also one of the asks that you can do is ask them to lift you up in prayer, and try to get them to sign on to your MailChimp, your prayer updates. And then you're of course going to want to ask for financial support. And we're gonna role play that piece here in a little bit. Does anybody need a break before we do that? Okay. So I'm hoping you'll find this part fun. We're going to practice our asks in a role play. Each of you will get the chance to play a potential ministry partner who has a different ethnic background than what you actually are in real life. And we're going to pretend that we're at the end of your ministry presentation when you're ready for the ask. So I want you, in each role play, I want you to start by asking if the person will pray for you, and then, offer to ask them if they would, mind be willing to get your ministry updates. Like, do you all know what MailChimp is? You've heard of that? That's usually what staff use to send prayer updates. So let's pretend that you're that's your main mode of sending out a monthly prayer update is MailChimp, and you're asking the partner if they would uplift you in prayer, and if they say yes, then can I add you to my MailChimp list? And then the second thing I want you to ask for is an ask for giving. So I'm going to tell each of you who you will be interviewing and who you are in your role play. There'll be 3 of them, so you'll each get a chance to do the to be the staff conducting the appointment, and then each of you will get a chance to be the donor, the prospective donor. And I'll give you a few minutes to make some notes to kind of get your thoughts in order of how you're going to structure these asks. And then if you want to ask some questions of the person that you'll be interviewing ahead of time, just to get some more information from them, you can do that in the chat. Are we clear on that, on how that works? Okay, so I'll tell you here. First, what I'm going to do is just tell you who is conducting the appointment with who, and then what the role the prospective donor, like what their ethnic background is actually in the role play. So the first scenario, Kristen is going to be the staff, and she will be meeting with Serena. Serena is a 60-year-old woman who was born in China, came to the United States in 1977 to study business at The Ohio State University. She came to know Jesus through InterVarsity in college and got into the hotel industry upon graduation, and she's worked her way up to being the owner of a Ramada Inn. She's actively involved in a Chinese church and spends a month every January, which is the slow season at the hotel, back in China doing undercover evangelism in her home city, especially to friends and extended family. Kristen met Serena when Kristen contacted the hotel for hosting a large group speaker overnight. Serena noticed that Kristen was involved with InterVarsity and became very excited. I'll go ahead and put this in the chat just so you can refer back to it.
Are these real people? Because that was very detailed.
That was based on a real person that I know. Yes, the owner of the Best Western here in Worcester.
I like the change of hotel brand.
Yeah, right. Because I thought Best Westerns aren't always that schwanky. So, okay, yep, there's that one. Okay. Again, I'll give you time between now and when we actually dive into these to get your thoughts together. So for our next scenario, Serena then will be the staff, and she'll be interviewing or having an appointment with Savannah. Savannah is a 22-year-old fellow graduate of Serena's college. She is an international student from Colombia who has gotten a green card and will be staying in the U.S. to head up a ministry to refugees at a large church in Grand Rapids. She does not have to fundraise her salary and benefits, but she does engage in some community fundraising for the ministry she is a part of. The church she works for does not permit women to preach at the pulpit or serve in elder or deacon roles. So I'll put that one into the chat as well. And then finally, we have Savannah being the staff and Kristen being the ministry partner. So Kristen is a 35-year-old Black history professor at Savannah's college who is very politically engaged in her community. I had to change some names here because we didn't have Nate with us. Kristen grew up in the church, but since she was an undergrad, has only really attended church when she visits family at Easter and Christmas. During the appointment, earlier in the appointment, Kristen shared that in recent years she has been skeptical of organized religion with all of its hypocrisy, especially as it pertains to race, like how Christians handle, matters of race. But she has softened a bit as she has encountered students and staff at her college who genuinely seem to love the Lord. Okay, I'll put that one in the chat as well. So everybody should have a different role play, right? You all have a different role play. Okay. And you all have someone that you're interviewing. Great. I will give you 5 minutes or so to kind of like think through how you will ask for prayer support and financial support. So I'll give you 5 minutes and then I'll check back.
Really fast, are we also going to tell them a little bit about InterVarsity or really just do the asks?
You'll have told them about InterVarsity leading, like we're pretending that you've already done that. And this is just at the very end of the appointment when you are ready to ask for prayer partnership and financial partnership. So there's a lot of ground you've already covered. Yeah. Remember that you can private message someone to get additional information that you might need. How you guys doing? Is that enough time? Okay. Yes? Okay. I don't know. Kristen looked a little hesitant, like she maybe needed a little bit more time, but 1 more minute? Okay, 1 more minute. My sister-in-law just gave me some pie so I can enjoy a bite of that.
Oh, is that Christy?
Yes, I'm at Christy's house.
Yeah.
And she has the reliable Wi-Fi.
Okay.
So we're asking for prayer and for like funding ask. Was there something else?
Nope. I mean, if you wanted to like ask the person to volunteer or something for extra credit, sure. But the assignment is just those first two, prayer and financial.
Hey, John, this is like kind of off topic. So for Chicago, I might be like somewhere else, like on the 27th. And I was wondering if I would just be able to drive there. If I can, then I probably can work something out so I could be on time for my flight in Akron. But I was wondering, like, what would be the best solution to that?
How many-
I don't know.
So you have something else going on the 27th, you said?
Yeah. So like I could still definitely drive. Like I could still probably make it back in Akron, but it might be a crunch time because the time of my flight. But I was wondering if there was any way, if there was an alternative route. Because it's probably not, because I don't know how American Airlines work, because it's more of the more weird airlines, like very like strict. But I was just seeing if there was any way.
You have a flight booked now to get to.
Yeah, sorry, but yeah, Latricia booked it for me in March, and so the days that she booked it, well, like she booked the like the time and stuff. Like I really wasn't looking at that when she booked it, but if not, that's okay. I was just trying to see if there was any way.
Oh, so you're saying you would arrive a day early? Am I understanding you right?
No, so I'll be like out of town. I think I'll be in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the 27th, and so I could come back, but I was wondering if there was any way I could like cancel the flight and probably just drive to Chicago. But if not, because I might be doing a lot, I just have to reschedule those plans to Michigan, and just like stay here in Youngstown. Because Akron is, it's only 45 minutes away from me.
You might be able to pay a fee and have them change airports. Like, where will you be in Michigan?
Southfield.
By Detroit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be worth trying to change the the originating flight.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of Akron.
Yeah, I'll see. I can call them and see what they can do.
But you have a car. You'd be leaving a car in Detroit then, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to get both your flight to Chicago and back out of Detroit.
Yeah.
I still think that might be your best
option.
Otherwise, you might forfeit the whole flight.
Mm-hmm.
You can I don't know, let you
put
toward a future flight, a future booking.
Mm-hmm.
It might be worth calling the airlines and just seeing what your options are.
Okay.
That seems crazy to drive all the way back to Akron and then fly. Although, what is that? 4 hours, 3.5 hours right to Akron?
Yeah, that's not that bad. I was just thinking of driving straight to Chicago, but that's 7 hours, and then that's that last. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay, well, let's start. And don't worry if this is a little bit, I don't know, not your most polished.
Right. Sure.
Presentation ever. That almost practice. So let's start with Kristen asking Serena against Serena is the 60-year-old woman born in China, came to the U.S. in 1977 to study business at OSU, came to know Jesus through InterVarsity and college, got into the hotel industry. I was the owner of a Ramada Inn, actively involved in Chinese food, both China year new evangelism. All right, take it away.
All right. So, Serena, I wanted to share a little bit with you about how I'm asking people to be involved with the ministry God's doing on campus. First, we're asking people to just be in prayer. We think that's really essential to the ministry God's doing, for people to be regularly lifting us up in prayer and asking God to help provide for our needs. The second thing that we're asking people for is financial giving. Either type of involvement would be a huge help to the ministry God's doing. And so if you're able to provide either of those, that's fantastic. I also will have an email list where you can regularly be updated with what I'll be doing on campus and prayer requests, if that's something that you would be interested in getting signed up for.
Does Serena have a response?
See. Sorry.
To be signed up for your emails.
Great. Thank you. What's your email? Just kidding. Wait, do I respond to that?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. Let me take down your email.
Okay.
And I will sorry. I will send you some more information. And if you're ever able to want to get involved more, like with financial giving or with prayer, just let me know.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thank you. Let's break this.
Okay.
What did we notice about the ask? Any observations?
I noticed that she didn't directly ask, well, she used the indirect ask. Like she didn't directly say, oh, you should, use this much financially or, and so I think she felt a little more comfortable asking for not maybe more comfortable, but I think it was more appropriate to ask semi-directly for prayer, which is something that's, I think, a little easier to give, and really every Christian should just give for something like that. And then kind of left the door open for finances.
Mm-hmm. Any other observations?
Yeah, I would say I was just highlighting my part, so I remember. Yeah, I would say the same thing. She kind of Kristen like made like an invitation for like the mail to sign up, and like kind of left it open, like because there could be follow up after that. Like once you email now that I see what it's all about, then there could be an invitation to ask later down the line. So that we're
Am I allowed to make observations about my own?
Yes. Yeah, sure.
I just realized, like, I understood the concept of like direct and indirect, and I was like, okay, I want to go with like a more indirect ask. But even as I was doing it, like I felt like I wasn't being direct enough, and so I almost felt like, yeah, I never, because I think I'm just so used to direct asks that trying to do an indirect ask, I was like, they're not going to respond at all. It's like, I'm not going to get any funding if I just have to ask like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I think in real life, it can hold to them more at a much slower pace with a bit more back and forth dialogue. I liked how you said, these are the things we're looking for. And you kind of mentioned, you kind of presented the need, similar to how Rachel did in the video with Auntie Anita. You mentioned that you're looking for people to support you in prayer, and then you mentioned the finances. One suggestion I would make is to wait for a clear response, or if there is going to be one, or just allow your partner to make some kind of response. Again, if she's from an indirect culture, she might not pick the ball up and run with it, so to speak. She might
Right.
kind of leave it sort of ambiguous or whatever, and that's okay. But allow more time, I guess, for her to give you a response to the prayer thing. And then one helpful thing to do if you're being indirect is to show the slide that has like your total ministry budget, and then you're looking for 50 partners at $50 a month, 25 partners at $100 a month, partners at $500 a month, that kind of thing. Like that's like sort of just to show that information is conveying exactly what your need is in a very clear way, but just simply by referring to it and showing it, but not having the words come out of your mouth in a direct way.
Right. That, yeah.
The same thing. So yeah. But yeah. So you were definitely trying to be indirect here. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was appropriate. Now I had the guy in the Best Western in mind, which is a man, but in the play, it was Serena, a woman. She has done business in the U.S. now for 40 some years, so almost 40 years, I guess. It's probably a little less important for communication to be indirect, or at least far to the left on the spectrum, than it would be somebody who hasn't interacted in the Western business world for that long. However, she still is involved in a Chinese church where the services are presented in Mandarin, and goes back to her home country every year. So very much still identifies as Chinese, has a lot of loyalty to her people and her home country. So yeah, I think the approach you took was good. So good job, everybody. Snap for Kristen. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next one, unless anybody has other questions or comments about what we just saw. Okay, move on to the next one. So this is where Serena's the staff, and she is having an appointment with Savannah. Savannah, again, is a 22-year-old fellow graduate of Serena's college. She's an international student from Colombia who's gotten a green card to stay in the U.S. to head up a ministry to refugees at a large church in Grand Rapids. She does not have to fundraise her salary and benefits, but she does engage in some community fundraising for the ministry she's part of. The church she works for does not permit women to preach at the pulpit or serve in elder or deacon roles. Are you ready, Serena?
Yeah, and so we're starting with the X.
Yep.
Okay.
You've done your appointment. This is just building to it. Now you're ready for the ask.
Okay, last question. Was me and Savannah in the same ministry when we were in college together?
I pictured you guys being together in varsity. Yeah.
Yeah. So Savannah, again, thank you for being willing to take some time out. I know that you're busy to meet with me. But before we go, sorry. I didn't even give you a chance to respond. So before you leave, I just want to make 2 invitations. So first, my first invitation is I want to invite you to pray with what God is going to be doing on the campus, just through the members that are a part of this ministry team and a leadership team, but also for me as I listen to God and be obedient to what he's calling me into, as I even grow as well. And also, I would like to invite you to give to this ministry to keep it going. I know that you are doing prior ministry too with refugees, and we know that to continue the advancement what God is calling us to do, like money is essential in that. So I just want to invite you to also think about giving to the ministry so that students can be met. Students will be funded to go on conferences and just get out of the campus. I know that you know what that felt like when you were able to go to a conference to get off of campus and really spend time with God outside of this enclosed campus space. So, yeah.
All right, sure. Yeah, I'd love to pray, and I'll check about like finances to see what I can do to support you. Thank you for
Yeah.
thinking of me.
Yeah, for sure. And
All right. Well, let's debrief this interaction. So, what observations do you have about what you just saw happen?
okay.
I thought that you made it very like specific to like her experiences, which I thought was good. And I liked how you were like, you know what like this has been like, or you know how beneficial like this experience was for you, like as a college student, and as a like an international student, I think, and specifically on campus.
Yep.
I also noticed, I think the ask was kind of like a mix between direct and indirect, which I think was appropriate because you assume that if the student's from Colombia, she's Latina, and we talked about how that's more indirect culture, but they're also pretty good friends who are familiar with the ministry and familiar with the same path of outreach. So I think it was a good balance to do a bit of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So when it's a peer, especially someone that you are closely connected to, who has been dwelling in your own culture for a while, you can be you're free to be a little bit more direct with them. Yep. Any other observations? I really liked how you related it back to Savannah's own experience, not only in college, but in what she's doing now. Again, to pause after the first ask, which is for prayer, and like let them respond in some way. I think both of you so far have just sort of like morphed the two asks into one ask. It'd be great to invite to pray, let them respond, and then invite them to give. And rewatch that video with Rachel, the staff worker, asking her people, both her white partner and also then her auntie Anita. I think she demonstrates very well how to ask for those two different things in a distinct way. And then I also, and we'll talk more about this, I think, going forward, but Savannah's response to the question about financial support was, I'll have to see. And so then your response, Serena, would be, all right, well, I will contact you in a week or in, 2 weeks from now. You always want to keep the ball in your own court. And if the person seems a little bit vague about when they will actually contact you, then chances are they're either not intending to do it at all, or the likelihood that they actually will, even if they are intending to get back to you, is lessened. But if you look them in the eye and say, I will contact you in a week from now, I think we can do that even with indirect partners.
Yeah.
Once you're to that point, So, all right. Well, good job, you two. That's good. Any other questions or observations about that before we move on to the third one? No? Okay. We're on track to get out a little early tonight, I think.
Ooh.
Last words, though, right? So, in this one, Savannah will ask Kristen. Kristen is a 35-year-old Black history professor at Savannah's College who is politically engaged in her community. Kristen grew up in the church, but since she was an undergrad, has only really attended church when she visits her family at Easter and Christmas. During the appointment, Kristen shared that in recent years she has been skeptical of organized religion with all of its hypocrisy, especially as it pertains to the discussions of race and how the church treats ethnic minorities, etc. But she has softened a bit as she has encountered students and staff at her college who genuinely seem to love the Lord. So, have at it.
All right. Well, Dr. Rexford, I really appreciate, sorry, I knew you're going to laugh. I really appreciate that you met with me today, and I've loved hearing more about what you've been doing in the community. And I've also really appreciated how open you've been with me about your experiences with a lot of the brokenness in the church. And thank you so much for listening. Let me talk a little bit more about InterVarsity. It's been really great hearing your perspective and getting to share. Can I ask you a few more things about like ways you can maybe be part of this ministry?
Sure.
All right. So one of the first ways that I really need support in this ministry is through prayer. So prayer for me as I go out and talk to students and faculty, prayer that I can listen well to God. I need prayer for the students as well, students who are there, and for students who aren't in our chapter yet. We'd love to be able to reach with a lot of the message I've shared with you, message about who Jesus is, and messages about how the message of justice really does relate to the gospel directly. And so I know this is a place that you were talking about wanting to explore some more, so I would love it if we can talk about ways that you can be praying for this ministry.
Sure. We can talk more about that. Yeah.
All right, awesome. I'd love to share a little bit more about specific things that you can pray for. The second thing I'd like to ask is we have a lot of need for financial support in the ministry, and I have a chart here of some of the places we do financial support. And a lot of this goes into, again, helping students and faculty see what the message of the gospel is, in talking about who Jesus is and what he did for us on the cross. And also some of the other things we talked about that you have a heart for, like what the gospel means for justice, for ethnic injustices in our country, in our world. So when people are supporting this part, they're also supporting students getting to learn about what the full gospel really looks like, about places like Cleveland, where there's still lots of systemic racism and injustice, and how if we're really going to follow the gospel and Jesus, we have to be fighting for these systems to end. So if that's something that you'd want to support, I'd love to be able to talk more in the future.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about it and how I can help.
Perfect. So can I ask you, what's a good way for me to follow up with you in, say, well, I know what your class schedule is about finals now. Would 2 weeks be a good time to check back in with you?
2 weeks is perfect.
All right. So what's best for you? Email, like a phone call?
Can you text me?
Text, absolutely, yeah. So I think I have your number here already. It's this one, right?
No. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And before I go, is there anything I can pray for you for?
I've got a lot of stress, with finals coming up and students. So just be praying for that.
Yeah, absolutely, I will. Great. Amen.
Amen. That was quick. Yay!
Let's talk about this one a little bit. Any observations you care to share?
I noticed that Savannah made the connection between like what the professor was struggling with was just like seeing like organized religion and justice and all those things. So really trying to make a connection with that. So I noticed that. And I noticed that she asked for a follow-up, which was really good. How can I follow up with you? When is the best time and stuff like that? So that's good. And also ending like, how can I pray for you?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a nice touch. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed those things too. It felt like kind of similar with Serena's, where it was almost a mix of indirect and direct. There was a lot of like direct explanation of things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the actual asks.
Yeah.
Direct. Is that what you were going for, Savannah, or was your intent to be direct across the board?
I think a little bit of both, because I knew this person was like faculty, and I'd kind of assumed I didn't know them super well. And so there's also that, general, I think, to show respect, because if this is a faculty I don't know as well, then I definitely want to address them by, their title and not be super direct. I think also because we talked about being a little more indirect with non-evangelical people, and I figured that this professor probably wasn't super evangelical if they're only attending church on Christmas and Easter and have, trust issues with organized religion.
Yeah. All right. Good. I loved how you were sensitive to her exam schedule. You
Mhm.
you'd call back in 2 weeks rather than next week or whatever. That was considerate of you, and I'm sure appreciated by her. Yeah.
I did appreciate that.
Yeah, good. Very good. Well done, everyone. Anything new that you've learned tonight about, as you've played, are you learning aspects of this that feel stretching to you? Feel like you're going to need to practice a whole lot more with one particular aspect over another? Is this coming easy for you? Is it difficult to kind of wrap your mind around? Let's hear some of your general big picture sort of thoughts on direct versus indirect asks.
I think I keep going back to like I had heard the terms often enough that I thought I did like conceptually understand them, but as I was like making an indirect ask, I was like, this doesn't feel effective for me. But I think it's something I just have to keep pushing back against, because it's just not I'm used to asking directly for things, and I feel like that's how I've been taught by my church and by university.
Yep.
And so I have to kind of like keep that in mind as I engage with people who I need to make indirect asks for, and remind myself like that it is a longer process. It still can be effective, but also to be really good about following up with that in the midst of being indirect.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I want to encourage you guys, since I think the majority, for all three of you, and probably the others who aren't here tonight, I think the majority of your partners, it's going to be appropriate to do direct asks with. And so sometimes we get nervous and a little timid when it comes to making the ask. And then inadvertently, our supposed direct ask comes out as indirect. Like we kind of, I don't know what the word is, soften the ask a lot, just because we feel a little self-conscious or something. I was working with a new intern from a year ago, who had wonderful visits with in-person appointments with a whole number of people, and but just wasn't getting through, like wasn't getting any pledges really. And as I probed the issue with him, I realized I don't think he's actually making the ask. So I had him kind of like demonstrate for me how he went about doing it, and it was like he was doing an indirect ask at times when it was not appropriate to do. indirect, and that to actually do a direct ask would get him a whole lot further. And so just a word of caution as you proceed, as you are thinking through and practicing, whenever it is appropriate to do a direct ask, work up the nerve to do it. It's going to feel uncomfortable. Those 3 seconds of silence after you're done asking can feel like, an hour, but I promise you it will feel less and less awkward the longer you do it and the better practiced you are. So any other thoughts? Guess not. Okay.
No.
We will.
I think I was just gonna say, like, to affirm, because I like, so I don't like, I'm just like staring. No, I think I just am learning a lot more of like what the direct and indirect asks look like, which I think is going to be helpful, because while I think a lot of the majority are going to be direct asks, I definitely do know like people from different cultures who I hope can join me in support that are going to be more indirect. So.
I just had a question about something like in the homework.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull it up really quick. So one of the things in the homework for today was to engage by calling, texting, emailing 2 to 4 people and to set up 1 to 2 appointments for the following week. So is that like getting started with presenting these cases and making asks?
Yeah. I think you can approach it as a practice run if you want to, like
Okay.
if it's a family member or something, or a roommate. But if you feel like you're in a place to actually go ahead and do the real thing, or if you want to like practice on a family member but actually say this ask is a real ask, then feel free.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of that, I realized today that even though you guys have watched the videos on the new ministry case, that we haven't actually given you the PowerPoint template to where you could, modify it and personalize it. And I think that would be pretty handy. So I reached out to Jasmine and Dabney, and Jasmine's concern was that we didn't want to overwhelm you guys in these last weeks of classes and finals, to make that an assignment to do. And I think historically they have actually, the new hires have put that together during MPD 102, which is, coming up in 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks. But Dabney said, you guys are going through the motions. We're having you do a presentation. If you, wanted to get a head start on that, you could actually come up with at least a rough draft version of your eventual PowerPoint presentation. And if you wanted to, so I think we're making it like a optional kind of thing, or we will make it sort of an optional thing. And you'll have a chance to tweak it and revise it as you go along. So what I'll do is I'll email the link to where you can find that and download that PowerPoint. It goes along with those videos that we watched, where instead of Rachel's story, you would put your own picture, you would highlight things on your campus that she highlights on hers, that kind of thing. So
are we thinking like with all of the appointments that we do to present a case with all of them?
Mostly, like you'll sometimes have you mean for this week or down the road forever?
I guess down the road.
Yeah. In general, we'd like you to present your case.
Yeah. Okay.
You have
I like that.
where, like, if you're meeting with someone who's very familiar already with WVU or whatever chapter you're on, you're going to be staffing, you don't need to explain different ways that InterVarsity, all the strategies that we use to reach people. You can like highlight a transformation story, and then
I think that makes sense. I like the case, and I'm comfortable doing it with everyone. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I had the right understanding of like what I was getting ready for with these appointments. What these appointments will look like.
Sometimes Julie and I will have a sit down appointment with a couple, and we'll just refer to some of the slides, but not do the whole thing. You know, just kind of depends on them.
Right.
But I think we want you to have the experience of going through it from start to finish and being very, very polished, and so it just rolls off your tongue, so to speak. So
Yeah, because I was going to say that would be beneficial for me presenting in front of my church, because they like graphic type deal. So
Yeah.
earlier, but I don't mind doing it now. But also, I wanted to say that I won't be here next Monday. I'll be in North Carolina, and we won't have Wi-Fi on the bus. Well, I'll be back from North Carolina. So
okay, thanks for
Chris and I will be at CFW.
I won't be here next week either, probably, because I mean there really isn't reliable Wi-Fi.
It's gonna be basically everyone who's not here today be there.
Yeah.
Well, Katie isn't going to be there next week either.
Oh, all right. Well, Rachel, Nate, and Jasmine will have a blast. And I guess John, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I didn't get you out very early, but early is better than nothing. So.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.